On the night of a luxurious party, a blind girl tries to walk alone among the elite who ignore her pain. Wearing a yellow dress and taking careful steps, she is humiliated in front of everyone by her own stepmother. The father returns and, upon seeing the scene, realizes too late who he was truly protecting and who he was hurting. If this beautiful story of triumph and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. Continuing. The sun was setting over the hills of Brighton, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected on the colourful facades of the lanes. The Albright mansion, one of the oldest and most imposing in the region, shone like a beacon in the approaching night. Each illuminated window invited the Brighton elite to yet another memorable celebration. Victoria Albright, stunning in her red dress that danced in the gentle breeze coming from the English Channel, greeted guests with a calculated smile. At 45, she had conquered not only the heart of one of the most influential businessmen in the region, but also the respect and fear of the entire local society. My dear Congresswoman Marcia Davies, what a pleasure to see you again. And is this the new Secretary of Culture? Charmed. Victoria navigated among the guests like someone who knows every reef of a dangerous sea. Her melodious voice filled the hall, competing with the sound of the guitar and ukulele playing popular songs with sophisticated arrangements. The colonial mansion, perfectly restored, maintained its original 19th century architecture, with Portuguese tiles on the walls and a wooden floor that creaked softly under expensive shoes. Tables laden with typical delicacies, mini quiches, delicate macarons and shrimp cocktail canapes drew guests to the center of the hall. It was Victoria's birthday celebration, but also a display of power. Businessmen, politicians, celebrities all wanted to be on the Albright's guest list, and she knew it. She used this prestige as currency, a valuable currency in the invisible economy of influences and favors. In the furthest corner of the main hall, Claire, as everyone called her, walked with careful steps and hands discreetly extended forward. Clara Albright, Augustus's daughter with his late first wife, wore a light yellow dress that seemed out of place among the dark and sophisticated tones of the other guests. At 16, her brown eyes remained still, but her expressive face showed every emotion with sincerity, something rare in that environment. "Are you all right, Claire? Do you need anything?" asked Mrs. Josephine, the housekeeper, who had worked in the house since before the girl's birth. She was one of the few people who truly cared about her. "I'm just a little thirsty, Josephine. Can you show me where the drinks are?" "Let me get it for you, my dear. Stay here and I'll be back in a minute." But before Mrs. Josephine returned, Claire decided to try and find the table herself. She had memorized the house's layout, knew how many steps separated each room, each piece of furniture. What she couldn't foresee were the waiters circulating quickly or the guests constantly changing positions. Across the hall, Victoria watched her stepdaughter with a look that mixed irritation and disdain. She had married Augustus Albright 5 years ago, attracted by his fortune and social position. The fact that he was a widower with a blind daughter seemed an insignificant detail at the time. Now, however, Clara's presence was a constant reminder of the woman who came before her. Eliza, whom everyone said had been the true love of Augustus's life. "Look at that. The blind girl decided to venture out alone," murmured Renée, Victoria's sister, as she took another sip of champagne. "This isn't going to end well." "She only does this for attention," Victoria replied through gritted teeth, maintaining a plastered smile on her face. "Augustus spoils her too much. He thinks that because she's disabled, she needs to be treated like a princess. And where is he? I thought he'd be here today. Business trip to London. He'll be back tomorrow." Victoria adjusted a perfectly dyed strand of hair. "Actually, it's better this way. When he's around, he only has eyes for her." As the two talked, Claire tried to approach the drinks table. Her white cane gently tapped the floor in front of her, but the noise of the party made it difficult to orient herself. That's when she bumped into a waiter carrying a tray with champagne glasses. The sound of breaking glass momentarily interrupted conversations and music. All eyes turned to the girl who remained paralyzed, feeling the shards around her feet. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered, her face reddening with shame. I didn't realize." Victoria crossed the hall with quick, precise steps. Her smile had disappeared, replaced by an expression that made even the closest guests recoil. She approached her stepdaughter with false concern. "My dear, are you all right?" she asked, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she bent down and whispered in Claire's ear, "You always find a way to spoil everything, don't you? Just like your mother." Before Clara could respond, she felt something warm running down her face, neck, and chest. The pain came a second later. Victoria had taken a bowl of hot fish broth and poured it over her head. The girl's scream was stifled, more from surprise than physical pain. Her delicate hands went to her face, trying to wipe away the liquid that ran down her hair, sticking to her neck. "Don't do this to me, Mommy," she pleaded in a trembling voice. The word Mommy seemed to irritate Victoria even more, her eyes glowing with barely contained fury. To the guests, she represented the concerned stepmother, trying to clean her clumsy stepdaughter's dress. To Claire, it was another episode of the nightmare she had been living since Victoria entered her life. Renee, Victoria's sister, watched the scene with a malicious smile on her lips. Leaning towards her husband, a construction magnate, she murmured, "That girl is a burden to the family. Augustus should have her institutionalized somewhere specialized." Her husband merely nodded, distracted by the champagne and the sight of a young socialite across the room. Claire remained standing, soaked and humiliated. Her body trembled slightly, but she maintained her posture. She would not let them see her suffering. She had learned in recent years to save her tears for when she was alone. Mrs. Josephine approached, horrified, but before she could help, Victoria intervened. "I'll handle this, Josephine. After all, I'm her mother now." The venom in her voice was subtle but perceptible to anyone who knew her true character. It was at that exact moment that the main door of the mansion opened. Augustus Albright, a 52-year-old man with graying temples and an elegant bearing, entered carrying a package decorated with a golden bow. The expression on his face was one of fatigue after the journey, but his eyes immediately sought out two people, his wife and his daughter. What he saw left him paralyzed. Claire, his little warrior as he used to call her, stood in the middle of the hall, the yellow dress he himself had chosen now stained and wet, her hair clinging to her face. And around her, as if nothing was happening, dozens of people continued to feast, drink, and pretend. The gift he had brought for Victoria slipped from his hands and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Ignoring greetings and surprised glances, Augustus strode across the hall towards his daughter. As he got closer, the smell of fish broth and the sight of the small burns on Clara's delicate neck made his blood boil. Without saying a word, he took his daughter's hand and looked directly into Victoria's eyes. For the first time since he had known her, he clearly saw what was hidden behind that seductive smile. The coldness, the cruelty, the contempt. Victoria felt the weight of that gaze. In 5 years of marriage, she had never seen Augustus so serious, so lucid, as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. Quickly, she changed her expression to one of maternal concern. "Augustus, darling, what a wonderful surprise. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Her voice sounded sweet, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. "There was a little accident with Claire. You know how clumsy she can be sometimes. She bumped into a waiter and, well, we were just about to clean her up." Augustus did not respond. He continued to hold Clara's hand firmly, as if fearing someone might snatch his daughter from him again. He turned to the girl and asked in a gentle voice, "Are you all right, my daughter?" Clara hesitated. Her eyes, unable to see, seemed to search the void for some sign that she could speak the truth. Her hands trembled slightly. I'm fine, Dad, just a little wet." The sound of the music gradually faded. The guests, realizing something was wrong, began to discreetly move away, forming small groups whispering about what had happened. Some, more sensible, began to say their goodbyes. Augustus, still in silence, took off his jacket and placed it over Clara's shoulders. Then he turned to Victoria. "The party's over," he said with a calm that contrasted with the storm in his eyes. "Thank you all for coming, but I ask you to leave now." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Augustus's gaze silenced her. In a few minutes the guests departed, some embarrassed, others too curious to hide their interest in the family drama they had just witnessed. When the last guest left, only Augustus, Clara, Victoria, Renee and her husband, who refused to leave, and a few household staff remained, including Mrs. Josephine, who watched everything from a distance, hoping that the truth would finally come out. "Now," Augustus said, "can someone explain what really happened here?" Victoria stepped forward, her eyes brimming with artificial tears. She placed her hand on her husband's arm, who immediately removed it. "Augustus, I know it looks bad, but it was an accident. Clara bumped into the waiter, the glasses broke, and when I went to help her I tripped and the broth fell on her. You know I would never hurt our daughter." The emphasis on the word "our" made Clara shiver. That woman had never treated her as a daughter, had never shown her the slightest genuine affection. On the contrary, ever since she lost her mother and her sight in the accident 5 years ago, Victoria had become her main source of torment. "She's lying, Dad," Clara finally said, her voice low but firm. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria froze, her face a mask of disbelief and suppressed anger. "What did you say?" Augustus asked, gently squeezing his daughter's hand. "She's lying," Clara repeated, stronger this time. "She did it on purpose. She threw the broth on me because I embarrassed her in front of the guests." Renee intervened, indignant. "This is absurd. Augustus, are you going to believe a confused and disoriented girl instead of your own wife? Victoria has been an exemplary mother to her, sacrificing her social life, her ambitions." "Shut up, Renee," Augustus cut her off, without taking his eyes off his daughter. "Continue, Clara." The girl took a deep breath. It was as if a floodgate had opened. 5 years of silent humiliations, of contained pain, of constant fear. 5 years of pretending everything was fine so as not to worry her father, who had already suffered so much with the loss of his wife. "It wasn't just today, Dad. It's always like this when you travel. She locks me in my room for hours, hides my cane, says I'm a burden, that I ruined her life, that you're only with me out of pity." Tears streamed down Clara's face now, mixing with the broth that still clung to her skin. "Liar," Victoria screamed, losing her composure. "This girl has always hated me. She's always done everything to keep me away from you, Augustus. She invents these stories because she wants your exclusive attention." Augustus let go of Clara's hand and took 2 steps towards Victoria. His face was transformed by anger, but his voice remained calm, controlled. "If my daughter were lying, Victoria, how would she have these small burns on her neck? How would the broth have fallen specifically on her head?" Victoria recoiled, the mask of innocence beginning to crack. I don't know, maybe—" "I saw everything, Mr. Albright." Mrs. Josephine's voice came from the back of the room. The grey-haired woman with a face marked by time stepped forward with determination. She had worked for the family for over 20 years, had helped raise Clara since she was a baby. Mrs. Albright took the bowl and poured it on the girl on purpose, yes. And it wasn't the first time she mistreated Claire. "I've seen a lot in these years, Mr. Albright. A lot that broke my heart. But I couldn't tell you because the girl begged me not to worry you." Victoria advanced towards Josephine, her face contorted with fury. "You meddling servant! Who do you think you are to—" Augustus grabbed Victoria's arm tightly. "Don't you dare," he said, his teeth clenched. Then he turned to Josephine. "Why did you never tell me anything?" The housekeeper's eyes filled with tears. "I tried, Mr. Albright. In the beginning I tried. But Mrs. Albright threatened to fire me, said no one would believe a servant's word against hers. And Claire! She suffered so much with the accident, with the loss of her mother. I didn't want to bring more suffering to you. She said you were finally happy again." Augustus closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the weight of that revelation. When he opened them again, there was a renewed determination in them. "Clara, go with Josephine now. Take a warm bath and change your clothes. I need to talk to my wife." Clara hesitated, clutching the sleeve of her father's jacket. "I don't want to leave you, Dad. I'm scared." The vulnerability in her voice broke something inside Augustus. He knelt to his daughter's height and gently held her face. "I'm not going anywhere, my little one. I'll never let anything bad happen to you again. I promise." Mrs. Josephine approached and gently guided Clara out of the hall, casting a final disapproving look at Victoria. When the two left, Renee and her husband made to approach, but a gesture from Augustus stopped them. "You two as well. Out of my house now." "Augustus, be reasonable," Renee began, but her brother-in-law interrupted her. "I said out." Reluctantly, the two withdrew. not before Renee whispered something in her sister's ear, who nodded almost imperceptibly. When they were finally alone, Victoria and Augustus faced each other like two fighters before the final combat. She was the first to speak, changing tactics completely. "Augustus, listen to me. I admit I lost my temper today, but you don't understand the pressure of raising a teenager with special needs. She's so difficult sometimes, so stubborn." "Stop," Augustus said, raising his hand. "Don't insult my intelligence. For years I believed I had found someone who could fill the void left by Eliza, someone who would love my daughter as I love her." Victoria tried to approach, but he recoiled. "I was a fool, blinded by my own loneliness. While I traveled, building an empire to secure the future of both of you, you tortured my daughter, the only living memory I have of Eliza." "There it is," Victoria exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. "You never loved me, Augustus. It was always her, always Eliza. Clara is just a piece of her that you refuse to let go. And me? I'm just the convenient substitute, the new wife to take care of the house and the disabled daughter while you expand your business." Augustus stared at her, surprised by the venom emanating from the woman he had once thought he loved. "You're right about one thing, Victoria. I never should have married again. Not when my heart still belonged to Eliza. That was my mistake, and my daughter paid for it." Victoria laughed, a cold and cruel sound. "You think you can just dismiss me? After everything we've built, I'm Victoria Albright now. I have my place in Brighton society. I have influence. You have nothing," Augustus cut her off. "Tomorrow my lawyers will file for divorce. You will leave this house with only what you brought when you arrived." Victoria's face paled. "You can't do that." "I can, and I will. And if you try to fight, if you try to threaten me, or God forbid, if you approach my daughter again—" Augustus moved closer, his eyes fixed on hers. "I will destroy you socially, Victoria. Everyone will know the monster that hides behind that beauty." Victoria recoiled, the mask of arrogance finally crumbling. For the first time, she seemed genuinely frightened. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things and leave my house," Augustus concluded, turning his back and walking towards the stairs that led to the bedrooms. The next morning dawned with Brighton's typical clarity, the sun filtering through the curtains of Clara's room. The girl had slept little, tormented by nightmares where Victoria returned to seek revenge. She woke with a start upon hearing soft knocks at the door. "Claire, may I come in?" Her father's voice was gentle, almost hesitant. "Yes, Dad." Augustus entered and sat on the edge of the bed. He remained silent for a few moments, as if searching for the right words. Clara reached out and found his hand, squeezing it lightly. "Is she gone?" she asked, her voice still hoarse with sleep. "Yes, my daughter. She left in the early hours of the morning while you were sleeping. She only took her clothes and personal belongings." Clara nodded, feeling an immense weight leave her shoulders. For the first time in 5 years, she could breathe without fear inside her own home. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you before. I didn't want you to suffer anymore. You had already lost Mommy, and you seemed so happy with her at first." Augustus felt his eyes fill with tears. He pulled his daughter into a tight embrace, allowing himself to cry for the first time since Eliza's passing. "No, my little one. I'm the one who asks for forgiveness. I should have noticed. I should have been more present. I failed you." They remained like that for a few minutes, embracing in silence, as if recovering the lost years of complicity and affection. It was Augustus who finally pulled away, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "We have a lot to talk about, Clara. About what happened. About how we'll move forward from here. But first, how about a special breakfast? Mrs. Josephine is in the kitchen preparing those pancakes you love, with caramelized banana." Clara's face lit up with a smile, a genuine smile, which hadn't appeared for a long time. "Can I have breakfast on the veranda? It's been so long since I felt the morning sun on my face." Augustus frowned, confused. "Of course you can, but why wouldn't you?" Clara hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Victoria used to say it was inappropriate for me to eat on the veranda, that the neighbors might see me and get a bad impression of how I eat." Her voice was almost a whisper now. "She said I was too clumsy, that I spilled food, that I embarrassed the family." Augustus's expression hardened for a moment, but soon softened as he looked at his daughter. "That will never happen again, Clara. This is your home. You can eat wherever you want. You can walk wherever you want. And we'll start today. They had breakfast on the veranda, feeling the gentle breeze from the sea. Mrs. Josephine joined them, something that had never been allowed while Victoria was around. The housekeeper told stories of when Clara was a baby, of how Eliza sang her to sleep, of how her first steps had been taken right there on that veranda. Gradually, Clara began to relax, laughing at the stories, asking questions about the mother she barely remembered. Augustus watched the transformation with a mixture of joy and guilt. How had he not noticed how trapped, suffocated, and terrified his daughter was? How had he allowed that woman to enter their lives and cause so much damage? "Dad," Clara said suddenly, interrupting his thoughts, "I wanted to resume piano lessons." "May I?" Augustus felt a pang in his chest. Clara had always been talented. Since childhood, she showed an aptitude for music. Even after the accident when she lost her sight, she could still play by ear. But the lessons had been abruptly interrupted about 3 years ago. "Of course, my daughter. Why did you stop?" Clara lowered her head, nervously fiddling with the edge of her cup. "Victoria said it was a waste of money, that I would never be good enough because of my condition. She fired Professor Beatrice and said it was you who ordered it." Mrs. Josephine made a sound of indignation. Augustus took a deep breath, controlling the anger that grew within him. "I'll call Beatrice today. If she can't come back, we'll find another teacher. And what's more, Clara, I want you to tell me everything, absolutely everything, that Victoria prevented you from doing. We will reclaim every piece of your life that she stole." The day unfolded in a kind of rediscovery. Clara, hesitant at first, opened up more and more. She told about the Braille books Victoria hid, about the dog she had for 2 weeks before her stepmother claimed allergies and gave it away, about the letters she wrote to her father during his trips that were never sent. Augustus listened attentively, mentally noting every injustice, every small cruelty. He promised himself he would compensate his daughter for every moment of pain. In the afternoon, they received a visit from Dr. Marcus, the family lawyer. While Clara rested in her room, the two men talked in the study. "The situation is clear, Augustus," the lawyer explained, flipping through some documents. "With the witnesses we have, especially Mrs. Josephine, and the physical evidence of the abuse, we can ensure that Victoria will take nothing more than what we agreed upon. The prenuptial agreement you insisted on was providential. I don't care about money, Marcus. I just want to make sure she never comes near my daughter again. And she won't. I'm preparing a restraining order. But I need to warn you, Victoria is not the type of person who accepts defeat easily. She has connections, influential friends." "I have more," Augustus cut him off. "And unlike her, I built my influence with honest work. If she tries anything against Clara, I will not hesitate to use all the resources I have." Dr. Marcus nodded, admiring his friend's determination. "There's one more thing, Augustus. Her sister, Renee, was involved in some of the abuse episodes, according to Mrs. Josephine. Since she's married to Robert Maxwell, who has business dealings with you." Augustus slammed his hand on the table. "Terminate all contracts with his companies immediately." "That could cost millions, Augustus. The waterfront project, I don't care. I want those people out of my life, out of my house, out of my business. Find other partners, other construction companies. Maxwell is out." The lawyer sighed but did not argue. He had known Augustus long enough to know that when it came to Clara's safety, there was no negotiation possible. After Dr. Marcus left, Augustus went upstairs to check on his daughter. He found her sitting by the window, her fingers running over the pages of a Braille book. She seemed so fragile and at the same time so strong. She had survived 5 years of psychological torture and still managed to smile, still managed to love. "What are you reading?" he asked, sitting beside her. "The Little Prince." Josephine found it hidden at the back of the laundry cupboard. "Victoria said she had donated all my children's books." Augustus closed his eyes for a moment, containing his anger. "Claire, I want to ask you something important." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Why did you never tell me? All the times I called when I came back from trips, you always said everything was fine." Clara slowly closed the book, her fingers caressing the worn cover. "At first I tried. Remember when I complained that she had put away my favorite cane? You said she must have a reason, that I needed to try harder for us to become a family." Her voice carried no accusation, just a statement. "After the accident, you were so sad, Dad. When you met Victoria, it was the first time I heard you laugh again. I didn't want to take that away from you." Augustus felt as if someone had stabbed his heart. His own words had silenced his daughter, making him an unwitting accomplice to the abuse she had suffered. "Besides," Clara continued, "she always said that if I told, you wouldn't believe me. That you would choose her because she was normal, because she could give you other children, perfect children." Augustus pulled his daughter into his arms, no longer able to hold back his tears. "Never say that again. Clara, you are perfect exactly as you are, and I would never, under any circumstances, choose anyone over you. You are my daughter, my blood, the only family that truly matters." They embraced in silence, letting tears wash away years of pain and misunderstanding. When they finally separated, Augustus held his daughter's face in his hands. "Starting today, a new phase begins for us. First, I will drastically reduce my travels. I will delegate more, work more from home. But Dad, my businesses exist to guarantee your future, not the other way around. Second, we will seek out the best specialists, not just for the piano, but for everything you want to learn. Swimming, literature, mathematics, whatever you wish." Clara smiled, but soon became serious again. "What if she comes back, Dad? What if she tries to hurt me again?" "That won't happen," Augustus assured, his voice firm. "I've already taken all legal precautions. Victoria will not be able to approach you or this house. And to further ensure your safety, I've hired a security guard who will be at the entrance. In addition," he hesitated, unsure if he should share the next step. "In addition, I thought maybe we could move. Not immediately, but in a few months. Start over somewhere else. I've received proposals to expand the business to Sydney." "What do you think?" Clara reflected for a moment. "I don't know. This house has so many memories of Mommy, and I have school, Josephine. Josephine would come with us, of course. And as for school, we could find a specialized institution with more resources for visually impaired students. But we don't need to decide now. It's just a possibility." Clara nodded, thoughtful. The idea of a new beginning away from the shadows of the past had its appeal. But leaving Brighton, the city where she had grown up, where every corner held memories of her mother, "We can think about it calmly," she finally said. "But for now, I'm just happy to be able to breathe in peace in my own home." Augustus kissed his daughter's forehead. "I'll be by your side every step of the way, my little one. I promise." That night, for the first time in years, Clara slept without fear. There were no nightmares, no startled awakenings. Instead, she dreamed of a piano, her hands dancing over the keys, creating melodies that spoke of hope and new beginnings. In the next room, Augustus remained awake, mentally replaying the events of the past few days, trying to understand how he had been so blind for so long. The subtle changes in Clara's behavior, her progressive isolation, Victoria's seemingly innocent comments about the difficulty of dealing with a blind teenager. It all made sense now, like pieces of a morbid puzzle. And guilt consumed him. He should have noticed sooner. He should have questioned, investigated. Instead, he buried himself in work, delegating to his second wife the responsibility of raising his daughter, believing he was giving Clara the maternal figure she needed. What a cruel irony. In trying to fill the void left by Eliza's departure, he had ended up exposing his daughter to a much worse evil than absence, the presence of someone who despised her for simply existing. The next morning, Augustus woke with renewed determination. The first step would be to regain his daughter's trust, to show her that she could always count on him for anything. The second, more difficult, to learn to be not only a father but also a bit of a mother to Clara. Professor Beatrice was the first to arrive. A woman of about 60, with grey hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and a warm smile that seemed to light up any room. When Clara heard her voice in the living room, she ran down the stairs, guiding herself by the sound with impressive precision. "Beatrice!" she exclaimed, opening her arms. The professor hugged her tightly, her eyes moist. "My dear girl, how I've missed you. When your father called me yesterday, I could hardly believe it. I barely slept, eager to resume our lessons." Augustus watched the scene with a lump in his throat. He remembered how Beatrice had always been more than a piano teacher. She was a friend, a confidant to Clara. How had he allowed Victoria to push her away? "Your piano is tuned and waiting for you," Augustus said, guiding the two to the music room. a room that had remained closed by Victoria's order in recent years. I had it cleaned yesterday. The black grand piano gleamed under the light streaming through the newly opened windows. Clara approached slowly, touching it with reverence as if greeting an old friend. Her fingers glided over the keys, producing a simple scale that echoed through the room. "I still remember," she whispered. Amazed, Beatrice sat beside her on the bench. "Of course you remember, dear. The music is within you. It's not something you forget." For the next 2 hours, Augustus remained in the room, silently observing his daughter's rebirth. With each note, each melody, it was as if Clara was reclaiming a piece of herself. She started with simple pieces, to warm up fingers that hadn't played in a long time, but soon she was performing Chopin with the same skill as before. "She has a rare gift," Beatrice commented when the lesson ended, and Clara went up to rest. Even after so much time without practice, her technique is still impressive. "But more than that, she feels the music, Mr. Albright. Few people have that ability." Augustus nodded, moved. "I know I have a lot to make up for, Beatrice. Lost years. The important thing is that you're starting over now. And if I may say so, it's never too late when it comes to love and music." In the days that followed, the Albright house began to take on new life. The sound of the piano filled the rooms that had previously remained in oppressive silence. Clara began to move freely through the spaces again, relearning the paths, reclaiming territories that had been declared forbidden by her stepmother. Augustus completely reorganized his work schedule. He cancelled non-essential trips, began attending meetings via video conference, and delegated more responsibilities to regional managers. His office at the company remained empty most days, as he adapted a space at home to continue managing his businesses without being away from his daughter. One particularly warm afternoon, while having ice cream on the veranda, Clara surprised her father with a question. "Dad, do you think I'll ever be able to live alone? Have my own house, my independence?" Augustus almost choked on his ice cream. He hadn't expected that kind of question so soon. "Of course, my daughter. Why do you ask?" Clara licked her ice cream thoughtfully before answering. "Victoria always said I would never be able to manage on my own, that I would always be dependent on someone, a burden. And I started to think, what if she's right?" Augustus put his glass aside and held his daughter's free hand. "Clara, look at me." Immediately realizing his mistake, he corrected himself. "I mean, listen carefully. Your condition does not define who you are or what you can achieve. There are thousands of blind people in the world who live completely independent lives. They study, work, raise families, but how? How do they do it? With the right tools and the right support." Augustus paused, thinking, "Actually, that gives me an idea. I'll arrange a visit to the Royal Victoria Institute for the Visually Impaired in Sydney. It's one of the most advanced education centres for visually impaired people in the country." Clara's eyes lit up. "We could really go there?" "Of course. In fact, it would be the first step for that idea I mentioned, about us moving. We could get to know Sydney, visit the institute, see if it's something that interests you." Clara smiled, excited about the possibility. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of a future full of possibilities, not limited by the walls of her house or the fears planted by Victoria. The next day, while Clara had a lesson with a new teacher, this time for mathematics, a subject she had always loved, Augustus received Dr. Marcus again. The lawyer brought news about the divorce proceedings. "Victoria is counterattacking," he informed without preamble. "She claims you threw her out of the house without reason, that it's all a misunderstanding. She says Clara has always been problematic, that she invented stories to separate you because she was jealous." Augustus felt his blood boil. "That's absurd. I haven't talked about her with anyone besides you and the household staff. She claims you commented to partners and hotel clients. She says she lost work contracts because of it." Augustus took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. "What can we do? For now, nothing but prepare our defense." But there's more. Judge Edward Martin accepted the request for a preliminary injunction. "Until the trial, you cannot make public statements about Victoria, not even to close acquaintances. She's trying to silence me," Augustus concluded bitterly. "She's trying to prevent me from telling the truth." "Exactly. And there's another thing that worries me. The people she's been meeting with. Besides Judge Martin, She's been in frequent contact with Marcia Davies. Augustus frowned, trying to remember where he had heard that name before. The detective? From the Women's Protection Unit? Yes, I'm afraid she's preparing some kind of accusation against you, Augustus. Something to turn the tables, to turn her into a victim and you into the perpetrator. A shiver ran down Augustus's spine. He knew Victoria's game of manipulation well, her ability to distort facts and convince others of her version of the story. If she managed to turn the police against him, what do you suggest? That you return to Brighton as soon as possible. We need to be ready for anything, and I need you here to take the necessary measures. Augustus looked through the glass of the veranda at Clara, who had lain down on the sofa and was flipping through one of the Braille books they bought at the Institute. The smile on her lips, her serene expression, how could he take that away from her now? How could he interrupt this trip that was proving so transformative? I can't do that to Clara, Marcus. She's so happy here. She's finally opening up, dreaming again. I can't just snatch her away from here because of Victoria's manipulations. There was a silence on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had a tone of warning. Augustus, I understand your concern for Clara, but think carefully. What will happen to her if you are arrested based on false accusations? Who will take care of her then? The question hit Augustus like lightning. He hadn't considered that possibility. If Victoria managed to convince the authorities that he was violent, abusive, he could lose not only his freedom, but also custody of Clara. Do you really think she would go that far? After everything she's already done? Yes, I do. And I think you believe it too, or you wouldn't have been so alarmed to see her in Sydney. Augustus ran his hand through his hair, desperate. He was cornered. If they returned to Brighton, Clara would lose the opportunity to visit the Sydney Opera House, to attend her favourite pianist's recital, to continue exploring the possibilities the Institute offered. If they stayed, they would be giving Victoria more time to execute whatever her plan was. I'll think about what to do, he finally said. I'll call you tomorrow with a decision. When he went back inside, he found Clara asleep on the sofa, the book still between her fingers. She looked so peaceful, so safe. How could he protect her without destroying her newfound happiness? Carefully, he carried her to bed and covered her. As he watched his daughter's serene face, he made a decision. He would not let Victoria win. Not this time. He would find a way to defend himself against the accusations without sacrificing Clara's well-being. The problem was, how? The rain finally fell during the night, a violent storm that seemed to want to wash the streets of Sydney. Augustus, who had barely slept again, watched the last drops run down the window as the sun began to rise on the horizon. He had spent the entire night reflecting on his conversation with Marcus. Victoria's strategy was clear. Corner him. Force him to return to Brighton where she would have more control over the situation. If he yielded, it would be a victory for her. If he remained in Sydney, he would give her more time to execute her plans. Already awake, Dad? Clara's sleepy voice brought him back to reality. She was sitting in bed, her hair disheveled from sleep, her face marked by the pillow. Yes, Princess. I couldn't sleep very well. Clara tilted her head as she always did when trying to read her father's emotional state through his voice. It's because of her, isn't it? You're worried she'll show up again. Augustus hesitated. He had decided not to tell Clara about the defamation lawsuit or Marcus's suspicions. He didn't want to burden her with more worries. A little. But we're not going to let that spoil our trip. What do you want to do today? We have the afternoon free before dinner at the hotel restaurant. Clara thought for a moment. Can we go to the Sydney Opera House? I know the recital isn't until the end of the week, but I'd like to see the place first, feel the acoustics, know where things are. Augustus smiled, once again admiring his daughter's practicality. Clara never allowed her condition to limit her. She simply planned ahead to navigate spaces more safely. Of course. Let's have breakfast and ask Julian to take us there. The Sydney Opera House, located in the centre of Sydney, was a majestic building. Augustus described to Clara every detail of the ornate facade, the colourful stained glass windows, the golden sculptures. Inside, they were greeted by a special guide, who allowed Clara to touch the details of the marble columns, feel the velvet of the armchairs, and explore with her hands the texture of the frescoes on the walls. The theater was designed to have perfect acoustics, the guide explained as they walked through the foyer. From any point in the audience, you can hear even a whisper from the stage. Clara smiled, enchanted. Can I try it? Go on stage? The guide hesitated, looking at Augustus. Normally we don't allow it, but given the special context. I promise not to touch anything, Clara assured, eager. With permission granted, Clara went onto the main stage, guided by her father. She stood for a moment, absorbing the energy of the place, imagining how many great musicians had stood exactly where she was now. Dad, go to the back of the audience, she suddenly requested. Augustus obeyed, curious. When he reached the last row, Clara began to play an imaginary melody in the air, as if there were an invisible piano in front of her. Then, in a clear and soft voice, she began to sing. It was a song by Eliza, which she used to sing to Clara to sleep when she was little. The girl's voice echoed through the empty theater, crystal clear and moving. Augustus felt his eyes well up. It was as if Eliza were there, singing through her daughter. When the song ended, the silence that followed seemed almost sacred. Incredible, the guide said, visibly moved. You have a rare gift, young lady. Clara smiled, radiant. The acoustics are perfect. Could you hear me well, Dad? Every note, Augustus replied, his voice choked. It was beautiful, my daughter. They left the theater with light hearts. Clara chattered animatedly about the recital they would attend, imagining what it would be like to hear a real piano in that magical space. I'm hungry, she declared suddenly. Can we have lunch before going back to the hotel? Augustus consulted his watch. It was almost noon. Of course, Julian mentioned a great restaurant nearby, specializing in traditional regional cuisine. What do you think? The restaurant was on a quiet street, with tables on the sidewalk under the shelter of a colorful awning. The smell of hearty stews and roasted meats filled the air, making Clara's stomach rumble with anticipation. They were in the middle of their meal when Augustus saw her. This time there was no doubt. Victoria was sitting alone at a table across the restaurant, watching them over her menu. When their eyes met, she didn't look away. On the contrary, she smiled slowly and waved, as if they were old friends. Augustus felt his blood run cold. It was no longer a coincidence. She was deliberately following them, appearing in places where she knew they would be. What's wrong, Dad? You suddenly got tense. Augustus forced himself to relax, not wanting to alarm Clara. It's nothing. I just remembered I have a business call in an hour. Maybe we'll have to cut lunch short. Clara pouted in disappointment but continued eating. Augustus, for his part, could barely swallow. He watched Victoria out of the corner of his eye, trying to anticipate her next move. He didn't have to wait long. After a few minutes, Victoria got up and walked directly towards their table, her high heels tapping rhythmically on the wooden floor. Augustus, Clara. What a lovely coincidence, she exclaimed, her mellifluous voice laden with false surprise. Clara froze at the sound of that voice, her fork halfway to her mouth. The panic on her face was visible. What are you doing here, Victoria? Augustus asked, his voice low and controlled, placing himself protectively beside his daughter. The same as you, I imagine, enjoying a holiday in this wonderful city. She turned to Clara, who still hadn't moved. Clara, dear, aren't you going to greet me? I missed you, you know. Clara trembled visibly, her face as pale as paper. Go away, she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Clara, how rude. After everything I've done for you. All the years I've cared for you as if you were my own daughter. Victoria extended her hand as if to touch the girl's face. Augustus intercepted the movement, holding Victoria's wrist tightly. Don't you dare touch her, he warned, his teeth clenched. And don't pretend it was anything but cruel to her. Victoria pulled her arm free, but without losing her smile. I see you're still sticking to that absurd story. It's a shame. Clara always had such a fertile imagination, always inventing stories to get attention from her daddy, who was too busy to notice her. Augustus stood up, furious. Enough, Victoria. I know what you're trying to do. I know about the defamation lawsuit. I know about your conversations with the judge and the detective. It won't work. Victoria's smile faltered for an instant, but soon returned, even colder. I don't know what you're talking about, darling. I just wanted to greet my family. I miss our home, you know, our life together. Clara, who had remained motionless until then, suddenly stood up. Despite the tremor in her hands, her voice sounded firm and clear. You are not our family. You never were. A family doesn't hurt, doesn't humiliate, doesn't torture. Several people at nearby tables turned, observing the scene with curiosity. Victoria noticed and quickly adopted an expression of hurt. Clara, dear, you're confused. I know the accident affected not only your sight, but also your memory and perception. The doctors warned us about this, remember, Augustus? About how she could create false memories? Augustus felt his blood boil. This was it, Victoria's plan. To make Clara seem mentally unstable, her medical condition a convenient pretext to discredit her testimony. Stop this right now, he ordered, his voice trembling with anger. Clara is perfectly sane, and there are witnesses, Victoria, people who saw what you did. Victoria took a step back, feigning fright. Augustus, you're scaring me. This anger, that's exactly what I've been warning my friends about. Your volatile temper, the way you treated me when we were alone. Augustus realized the trap. The angrier he got, the more he would confirm her narrative that he was the abuser, not her. He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. We're not doing this here, he finally said. Let's go, Clara. He picked up his daughter's cane and handed it to her, offering his arm to guide her. He left some notes on the table to pay the bill and led Clara out of the restaurant, feeling the curious stares of the other customers on their backs. Victoria did not follow them, but her soft laugh echoed behind them, a sinister reminder that the confrontation was far from over. In the car, Clara collapsed. The tears she had held back throughout the encounter now flowed freely, her body trembling with convulsive sobs. I hate her, she murmured through tears. I hate how she makes me feel small, helpless. Augustus hugged her, feeling completely helpless himself. I'm so sorry, my daughter. I'm so sorry she ruined our lunch, our afternoon. Clara pulled away, wiping her tears with the back of her hands. It's not just lunch, Dad. It's everything. She's going to keep showing up, isn't she? She's going to keep following us, tormenting us. Augustus had no comforting answer. He knew Victoria would not give up easily. Let's go back to the hotel. We need to rethink our plans. On the way, he called Marcus, putting the phone on speaker so Clara could hear. It was time to stop hiding things from her. She approached us directly, he reported, after telling him about the encounter at the restaurant. She's clearly trying to build a narrative where Clara is mentally unstable and I am violent. That's exactly what I feared, Marcus replied. Augustus, you need to go back to Brighton. Here we have more resources, more people who know you and can testify about your character. But the recital, Clara protested weakly. The Institute. We can come back another time, Augustus said gently. When all this is resolved, Clara lowered her head, defeated. Once again, Victoria had managed to take something from her to steal her joy. It was as if her stepmother's shadow pursued her, no matter how far they fled. At the hotel, while Clara rested in the room, Augustus made arrangements for them to return to Brighton the next day. He cancelled the remaining reservations, the car, the recital tickets, each cancellation a small defeat. He was almost finished when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mr. Albright? A female voice, professional, which he didn't immediately recognize. This is Detective Marcia Davies, from the Women's Protection Unit of the Sydney Police Department. I need you to appear at the police station tomorrow at 10 a.m. to give clarifications regarding a domestic violence complaint. Augustus felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Complaint? Against me? That's absurd. The complainant is Mrs. Victoria Albright, your wife. She presented disturbing evidence, including testimonies and photographs. Will you appear voluntarily, or will I need to send a police car? The veiled threat was clear. If he didn't appear, he would look guilty. If he went, he would be walking straight into Victoria's trap. I'll be there, he finally replied, his voice devoid of emotion. But I need to make it clear that these accusations are completely false. In fact, it was my wife who abused my daughter, who is blind. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. It's interesting you mention that. Mr. Albright, your wife already informed us that you might try that narrative. According to her, it's a common tactic of yours to accuse her of terrible things to divert attention from your own abusive behavior. Augustus closed his eyes, feeling cornered. Victoria had thought of everything, anticipated his every move. I will appear tomorrow with my lawyer, he finally said. Very well. Until tomorrow, then. When he hung up, he realized Clara was standing at the bedroom door, her face pale. "It was her, wasn't it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She did something against you." Augustus hesitated but knew he could no longer hide the truth. "Yes, Clara. Victoria reported me for domestic violence. I have to go to the police station tomorrow." Clara slowly sat in the nearest armchair, her fingers gripping the fabric tightly. "No," she murmured, shaking her head. "No, no, no. This can't be happening." Augustus knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "We'll sort this out, Clara. It's all lies, and the truth always comes out." "But what if it doesn't?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "What if they believe her?" Victoria always knew how to convince people, how to appear like the victim. Augustus had no answer. The same fear consumed him inside. He knew the system well. Domestic violence complaints were and should be treated seriously. But that meant that faced with Victoria's word against his, the authorities would naturally tend to protect the supposed victim first. "I won't let them separate us," he promised. Though he didn't know how he would keep that promise. Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "We need proof. Dad, proof of what she did to me. We have Mrs. Josephine's testimony." "It's not enough. She'll say Josephine is just a loyal employee of yours, who would say anything to protect you." Clara bit her lip, thoughtful. "We need something more concrete." At that moment, Augustus's phone rang again. It was Dr. Marcus returning his earlier call. "Marcus, the situation has worsened," he said, as soon as he answered, putting it on speaker again. "Victoria reported me for domestic violence. I have to appear at the police station tomorrow at 10 a.m. There was a moment of shocked silence on the other end of the line. "We need to act fast," the lawyer finally said. "I'll take the first flight to Sydney today. In the meantime, start gathering everything we have against her. Testimonies, photos, anything that proves the abuse against Clara." "The physical marks have already disappeared," Augustus lamented. "And the people who were at the party that night, when she poured the broth on Clara, they all refused to testify." "There must be something," Marcus insisted. "Think carefully." Clara, who had been listening attentively, suddenly lifted her head as if an idea had struck her. "The drawings," she said, her voice low but firm. "What drawings?" Augustus asked, confused. "My school drawings. Professor Helen, my art teacher, she always encouraged me to draw what I felt. Even after losing my sight, I kept drawing. They were always dark, without colors, full of scary figures." Clara paused, the memory visibly painful. "Helen called me several times to talk. She asked if something was happening at home. I never told her, but she knew, Dad. She noticed." Augustus blinked, surprised. He had no idea about this. In the rare moments he had attended school meetings, he had always only heard that Clara was a quiet, introverted student with no behavioral problems. "Do you think she would testify on your behalf?" Clara nodded energetically. "She tried to talk to you several times, but Victoria always intercepted, saying you were busy. In the last year, when the drawings got worse, she even suggested therapy. Victoria said I was already having it, that it was just a phase." "My God," Augustus murmured, guilt gnawing at him. Another sign he had ignored. Another lost opportunity to protect his daughter years earlier. "And there's more," Clara continued, now more animated. "Julia, my best friend until second grade. She came to our house almost every day after school. Once she caught us in the room. Victoria was... She was screaming at me, calling me useless, saying I was a dead weight. Julia heard everything. The next day she tried to tell the school coordinator, but no one believed her. A week later, Victoria convinced you to transfer me to another school. Augustus remembered that change. Victoria had argued that the new school had better resources for visually impaired children. He had never questioned it, trusting that she knew what was best for Clara. "I'll contact both of them immediately," he said to Marcus, who was still on the line. "And also the school. There must be records of these drawings of the teacher's concerns." "Excellent," the lawyer replied. "The more people we can bring to corroborate Clara's version, the better. Remember, we are dealing with a skilled manipulator. Victoria will certainly have her own witnesses, people she convinced that she was mistreated, that you are the monster in the story." As soon as they hung up, Augustus began to act. He called Clara's old school, asking to speak with Professor Helen. After some insistence, he got her personal number. "Mr. Albright?" The teacher's voice sounded surprised when she answered. After so many years, Professor Helen, I urgently need your help. It's about Clara. There was a tense pause on the other end. Is she all right? I always worried so much about that girl. She's with me now and she's safe. But we're facing a difficult situation. Clara told me about the drawings, about your conversations, about how you tried to warn about what was happening at home. A sigh of relief sounded from the other end of the line. So you finally know. For years I blamed myself for not doing more, for not insisting. But your wife was so convincing, always with a plausible explanation for everything. I understand. I was also deceived. But now I need you to help me protect Clara. Victoria is trying to separate us, inventing lies about me. Helen didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes. I still have some of her drawings, you know. I kept them because they worried me. I also have my notes from our conversations, the signs I noticed. I was putting together a dossier to take to Child Protection Services when Clara was transferred from school. Hope grew in Augustus's chest. It was more than he expected. Can you meet us tomorrow morning at the police station? It's urgent. I'll be there. The next call was to Julia, now a 19-year-old young woman. He got her contact through Professor Helen, who kept in touch with some former students. The conversation was more difficult. Julia initially seemed reluctant, fearful of getting involved. But when she learned that Clara had finally revealed everything, she agreed to help. I never forgot her look that day. Mr. Albright, so scared, so broken. I tried to tell the adults, but no one took me seriously. I was just a child. You did the right thing. Julia, and now you can help again. While Augustus made calls, Clara leaned back in bed, emotionally exhausted, but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes that wasn't there before. For the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, they could beat Victoria at her own game. Dr. Marcus arrived in Sydney around 9 in the evening. They met in the hotel room, reviewing the strategy for the next day. The lawyer was confident. With these new witnesses and evidence, we can not only refute her accusations, but also open a countersuit for false denunciation and, more importantly, strengthen our case for the abuses against Clara. When they finally went to sleep, it was past midnight. Augustus, despite the apprehension about what was to come, felt a surprising calm. They were prepared. They had the truth on their side. The next morning dawned clear and fresh. Clara insisted on accompanying her father to the police station, despite his attempts to spare her from that experience. I need to be there, Dad. I need to tell my story. If I stay here alone, I'll imagine things worse than reality. The Women's Protection Unit was located in a modern building in downtown Sydney. When they arrived, Dr. Marcus was already waiting for them at the entrance, along with Professor Helen, a woman of about 60, with grey hair and a determined look, and Julia, now a young woman, but whose face still bore traces of the teenager Clara had known. Clara, Julia exclaimed, hugging her friend tightly. I missed you so much. I was devastated when you changed schools without even being able to say goodbye. Clara returned the hug, silent tears streaming down her face. Thank you for being here, she whispered. It means a lot. Professor Helen also embraced Clara, emotional. You've grown so much, and you're still as brave as you were. They entered the police station together, a small delegation united by truth. At the reception, they were informed that Detective Marsha Davies was waiting for them. As they were led to her office, Augustus noted with apprehension that Victoria was already there, sitting in a chair, a handkerchief in her hands, as if she had been crying. Beside her, a woman in a suit whom he presumed to be her lawyer. Mr. Albright, the detective greeted formally, indicating the chairs in front of her. I see you've brought company. These people are key witnesses to clarify the truth about the false accusations against me, Augustus replied, keeping his voice calm. Victoria let out an indignant sound. False? I have photos of the bruises, Augustus. I have witnesses who saw how you treated me, how you humiliated me in public. Detective, this is clearly an attempt at intimidation, bringing all these people to pressure me to drop the complaint. Detective Marsha Davies was a middle-aged woman with a severe expression and shrewd eyes. She looked from Victoria to Augustus, then to Clara, clearly assessing the situation. We will proceed in order. Mr. Albright, You have been summoned to answer serious accusations made by Mrs. Victoria. Before hearing your witnesses, I need to hear your version of the facts." Augustus nodded, grateful for the chance to speak first. He told everything from the beginning: his marriage to Victoria after Eliza's loss, the frequent trips that kept him away from home, the subtle changes in Clara's behavior that he hadn't noticed at the time, and finally the fateful night of the party, when he caught Victoria abusing his daughter. I have a key witness in Brighton, Mrs. Josephine, who has worked in our home for over 20 years and witnessed many of the abuses. But today I brought other people who can confirm Victoria's pattern of abusive behavior towards my daughter. The detective listened carefully, making occasional notes. When Augustus finished, she turned to Clara. "Miss Albright, I know this must be difficult, but could you tell us your experience?" Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "I lost my mother and my sight in the same accident. At age 11, it was devastating. My father also suffered a lot, and I think that's why he became so attached to Victoria so quickly when he met her a year later. At first, she was kind to me, at least when my father was around." Clara paused, gathering strength. "After they got married, everything changed. When my father traveled, which happened frequently, she showed her true face. She would lock me in my room for hours, hide my cane so I couldn't move around the house, throw away my braille books." "Lies!" Victoria interrupted, standing up. "Detective, this girl has always been problematic. Doctors diagnosed reactive attachment disorder after her mother's death. She invents stories, always has, to attract her father's attention." "Madam, please," the detective reprimanded her. "You'll have your chance to speak. Let the girl finish." Clara continued, describing specific episodes of abuse: the public humiliations, the disproportionate punishments, the cruel words that constantly belittled her, and finally the night of the party. "She poured boiling broth on my head in front of all the guests. I felt so much pain, so much shame. And no one did anything. Everyone was afraid of her influence." When she finished, there were tears in the eyes not only of Clara, but also of Detective Marcia Davies, who seemed deeply affected by the account. "I have evidence that corroborates Clara's testimony," Dr. Marcus intervened, handing a folder to the detective. "Here are the drawings she made at school, clearly depicting abuse and fear. We also have the testimonies of Professor Helen and her friend Julia, who witnessed concerning behaviors or signs of abuse." The detective examined the drawings, her face visibly hardening. They were disturbing images, even for someone accustomed to dealing with cases of violence. Dark figures surrounding a small silhouette, monsters with distorted faces, scenes of helplessness and loneliness. "Professor Helen, can you confirm the authenticity of these drawings?" The professor stepped forward, emotional. "Yes, detective. Clara made them between 2020 and 2021, when I was her art teacher. I was so worried that I tried to talk to Mr. Albright several times, but Victoria always interfered. I was preparing a report for Child Protection Services when Clara was abruptly transferred from school." Julia also gave her testimony, describing the episode where she witnessed Victoria yelling at Clara, calling her useless and defective. "I was only 12, but I knew it was wrong. I told my mother, who advised me to talk to the school coordinator. But when I did, I was called a liar, a troublemaker. A week later, Clara wasn't there anymore." Victoria's expression had changed completely. The air of an innocent victim gave way to suppressed anger, a cold calculation in her eyes as she assessed the situation that clearly wasn't unfolding as planned. "This is a conspiracy," she finally said, her voice trembling with indignation. "Augustus obviously manipulated all of you. These people were paid to lie." Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, trying to calm her. "My client is visibly distressed, detective, which is understandable given the situation. We would like to present our own evidence." The detective nodded, but her gaze had already changed. The initial conviction, possibly formed by the first impression of Victoria as a fragile victim, began to give way to doubt. The evidence presented by Victoria's lawyer was flimsy: photos of bruises that could easily have been self-inflicted, decontextualized text messages, vague testimonies from people who claimed to have noticed tension in the couple during social events. "And what about your client's specific accusations?" the detective asked. "She claims Mr. Albright physically assaulted her when they were alone." Is there any evidence of this beyond her word? Any prior police reports, any medical attention? The lawyer hesitated. My client was afraid to report it before, Detective. Like many victims of abuse, she lived under constant threat and intimidation. I understand. However, what I see here is concrete evidence of abuse against the minor Clara, perpetrated by your client, and only vague allegations against Mr. Albright. Victoria, realizing she was losing control of the situation, decided to change tactics. Clara, my dear, she said, adopting a maternal tone that made the girl shiver. I know you're confused, that you mix real and imaginary memories. It's normal after the trauma you suffered. But deep down you know that I loved you, that I only wanted the best for you. Clara lifted her face, her sightless eyes fixed in the direction of Victoria's voice with unsettling precision. You never loved me. You hated me because I was a constant reminder of the woman my father truly loved. You wanted me to disappear, to be institutionalized somewhere far from home. I heard you telling your sister Renee that, planning how you would permanently remove me. Victoria paled, clearly not expecting Clara to know about that conversation. That's absurd. Renee would never confirm anything like that. Perhaps not, Clara agreed, a small smile forming on her lips. But Mrs. Josephine would. She was in the laundry room right next to the living room when you had that conversation. And she's not the only one who heard revealing things when you thought no one was listening. It was like watching a fortress crumble. Victoria's carefully constructed facade began to show visible cracks. Her gaze, once confident, now darted nervously between those present, seeking an ally, an escape. Detective, Dr. Marcus intervened. In light of this evidence, we formally request that the accusations against my client be dismissed for lack of evidence, and that an investigation be opened to ascertain the abuses committed by Mrs. Victoria Albright against Clara. Furthermore, we request the renewal of the restraining order in favor of the minor, prohibiting Victoria from approaching her within a minimum distance of 200 meters. Detective Marcia Davies looked long at everyone present, evaluating. After a few moments of tense silence, she spoke. Based on the testimonies and evidence presented, I determine the dismissal of the complaint against Mr. Augustus Albright due to lack of materiality. As for the accusations against Mrs. Victoria, I will open an inquiry to investigate them thoroughly. I will also grant the restraining order in favor of Clara Albright, preventing Mrs. Victoria from approaching her within a minimum distance of 200 meters. Victoria stood up, furious. This is absurd. I'll appeal. I'll report this farce. Madam, the detective interrupted her, her voice stern. I suggest you calm down. Your current behavior is not helping your case, and I must warn you that false accusations are a crime, with a penalty of imprisonment. Victoria paled even further, finally realizing the gravity of her situation. Her lawyer discreetly pulled her out of the room, whispering something in her ear. When they left, the silence in the room was broken by Clara's muffled sob. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief, of liberation. Augustus hugged her, also crying. It's over, my daughter. She can't hurt us anymore. Detective Marcia Davies cleared her throat, visibly moved. We still have procedures to follow, documents to fill out, but essentially, yes, it's over. You are safe now. In the days that followed, life began to resume a calmer course. They decided to remain in Sydney until the end of the week, as originally planned. Clara finally got to attend Arthur Melbourne's recital at the Sydney Opera House, an experience she described as transcendental. Through Dr. Marcus's contacts, they even managed a brief meeting with the pianist after the performance, where Clara played a passage from one of his compositions, impressing him with her musical sensitivity. Her enrollment at the Royal Victoria Institute for the Visually Impaired was confirmed for the next semester. Augustus, fulfilling his promise, had already begun searching for a house nearby, dreaming of the new beginning they both deserved. On their last night in Sydney, while having dinner on the suite's veranda overlooking the sea, Clara reflected on the turbulent journey they had traveled. You know, Dad, for a long time I thought I would never be free from fear, that even if Victoria wasn't physically present, her shadow would always be with me, controlling my thoughts, my actions. Augustus squeezed her hand across the table. And now? Clara smiled, her face illuminated by the moonlight. Now I know I'm stronger than fear, that we can rebuild our lives, create new memories to replace the painful ones. That being blind doesn't make me less capable, less complete. Augustus felt his heart swell with pride and love. You've always been the strongest. Of us too, Clara. Even in the darkest moments, you never lost your essence, your capacity to love. Clara laughed softly. I learned from the best. From Mommy, in the memories I have of her. From Mrs. Josephine with her unwavering loyalty. From Professor Helen and her persistence. And from you, Dad, who, even though you failed to protect me for a while, never stopped loving me. They remained in silence for a moment, just appreciating each other's presence, the sound of the waves in the distance, the promise of better days. How about we play together when we get back to Brighton? Augustus suggested suddenly. Me on the guitar, you on the piano. Like we used to. Clara's eyes filled with tears of happiness. I'd love that. We could play that song Mummy loved so much. Charming by a classic composer, Augustus completed, smiling at the memory. It was our song. It will be like having her with us again, even if only in spirit. Augustus nodded, moved. He looked at his daughter, his little warrior who was no longer so little, who had faced real demons and emerged victorious, and knew, with absolute certainty, that no matter what challenges they might still face, they would face them together, stronger than ever. The next day, as they boarded the plane back to Brighton, it was not a return but a new beginning. Brighton would be just a temporary stop before the definitive move to Sydney, where a new life awaited them. A life of possibilities, of music, of love. A life without fear. And in the weeks that followed, as they organized the move, sold the mansion in Brighton, and said goodbye to the few but true friends they had there, Augustus kept his promise. Every evening, father and daughter gathered in the music room to play together. Clara's fingers danced over the piano keys with renewed confidence, while Augustus accompanied her on the guitar, their melodies intertwining like their lives, healing old wounds, celebrating each new day. 6 months later, already settled in an airy house overlooking the sea in the Manly suburb, Clara was making impressive progress at the Royal Victoria Institute for the Visually Impaired. In addition to regular classes, she participated in the choir, practiced swimming 3 times a week, and had already mastered advanced urban mobility techniques that allowed her to navigate familiar routes alone. Augustus also flourished in his new life. He opened a small home office, from where he managed his businesses with a better balance between work and family. He became involved in accessibility projects in the city, using his influence to improve the lives of people with disabilities. And when, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, Clara performed for the first time in the Institute's auditorium, playing Chopin before an emotional audience, Augustus knew that they had finally reached the other side of the darkness, that the light that had always existed in Clara, her courage, her kindness, her inner strength, now shone unimpeded, illuminating not only her own life, but that of everyone around her. Dear listeners, we hope Clara and Augustus's journey has touched your hearts. For more emotional stories that explore human resilience and the transformative power of love, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Click the button on the left to access our special playlist with equally captivating narratives. If this story moved you, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Every day, we bring new stories that celebrate the human capacity to overcome adversity and find light in the darkest situations. We eagerly await you in our next encounter.